Welcome everyone to Moving Along. We're so excited to have Professor Mark Edwards here with us, who is the recipient of the 2025 award from the Stanley Fawn Award from our Movement Disorders Congress in Hawaii. Professor Edwards is a professor of neurology and interface disorders at King's College in London, and we're just so excited to interview him today about his award and his amazing contribution to our field. So, welcome, Mark.
Thanks very much indeed. It's great to be here.
So maybe just as a start, I'm just so fascinated by the term interface disorders. Maybe you could define what that is.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's another attempt and another way to talk about things which sit at this junction or interface between neurology and psychiatry. So people talk about neuropsychiatry, behavioral neurology, but there are these conditions which I suppose strongly sit at this interface. You could argue that that's in the end everything, but there are some conditions which are sort of highlight, I suppose, this interface and I suppose the tensions that exist because of the way our health services and the way our specialities are kind of separated. And in fact, societal thought is separated into mind and body or mind and brain. That there are these conditions that sit at the interface, particularly like functional neurological disorder.
I mean, so much of what you talk about in the FND space, which you've really been a pioneer in, describing some of these things around, also resonate with me in a diagnosis like Parkinson's disease.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's that's one of the things I was trying to get across in my talk. That although I think people with FND really highlight this area and they highlight a lot of the challenges and problems that we have there and lack of understanding and knowledge, actually those things are relevant for everybody with chronic illness, particularly chronic illnesses that have a significant mental health psychiatric component like Parkinson's disease. So absolutely. And that's for me the great prize, or could be the great prize, of kind of understanding more about FND, getting services, systems right for people with FND, is that that would actually help everybody manage better with chronic illnesses.
absolutely. So in the talk itself, you put up some very cool slides, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about one that resonated with me. You had one that had this sort of I have Parkinson's disease on the left side, and then on the right side it said I am sick, and there were some other terms there. Maybe you could explain that slide to us.
Yeah, but to me, I think it's just interesting in language the way that we talk about having diseases like Parkinson's, cancer, diabetes, but then we use this other phrase, which is I am sick or I am ill. So there's this difference between having and being. And I think that that's an important thing. It's not just by mistake that happens, because there is something different. There's an additional component to the disease which gives you this being thing that I am ill or I am sick. And that's the critical thing, which is often seems to be missing in the way that which we approach people who are sick and ill, because we concentrate a lot on the disease bit. And I agree with doing that. It's a really important thing to do. But we don't really devote any time really to the being bit of being ill.
And I think that there was a follow-up slide to that talking about disease process plus psychosomatic interface, which you just described to us, equals lived experience of being ill. And maybe you could just explain that slide as well.
Yeah, I mean that's this thing that I was talking about as this a kind of human equation that you have both of those things which add together to your experience of being ill, and that if you don't, and that maybe there's some conditions that are particularly highlighting this psychosomatic interface like FND, where that's maybe primarily the or the main problem, but in everybody both those things are active. And so, in order to treat people properly, in order to improve health, quality of life to the best extent we can, we need to be able to concentrate on both of those things and actually really put scientific rigor into that being bit of being ill, and treat it with the same seriousness as we do the disease bit of being ill.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think that that is the modifiable bit as well, right? So we have the sort of pathology of the disease, and then you have the human, sort of person experiencing it and how they cope and how they approach it. And I think that modifiability is an exciting interface in many ways. And you guys are making a lot of progress with that in FND, and perhaps we can apply that, as you said, to these other more common disorders like Parkinson. So very cool. Um, Maybe we could talk a little bit about, this sort of the dichotomy of being well, being whole in some sort of a way, and then being sick, I think that many people see this as a patient, for example, living with this as black and white. I'm well and I am sick, and now we have this sort of interesting time frame of being neurologists where we can kind of give with pretty high certainty the sense of a risk of getting sick, right? And I think that has often just giving that sort of sense of a high risk of getting sick to folks puts them sort of sometimes in a mind space of already being sick. Maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that um, uh, our diagnostic labels, they they're really powerful, and they change the way that people feel about themselves, their very identity, um, and they also drive symptoms in their own right. So this feeling that I could get this thing in the future and that's around the corner for me can drive symptoms as well as drive a critical change, I think, in identity. And that's a really we need to treat that with supreme care, because this is not something which you just should chuck around without any thought to those processes, and also any thought to what the person does with that information. So how could you support that? So we already, that's where genetic predictive counselling there is an aspect which is already formed in many healthcare systems around that, and that we should treat predictive genetic testing carefully. But this, as you say, it's spreading outside of that very closed environment to things more generally, like if somebody as an adult develops REM sleep behavior disorder, we know that's a really strong predictor of later development of Parkinson's disease. So how do we give that information? How do we support somebody after that information has been given? Because it's like handing somebody a hand grenade,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And you don't know what will happen. So we need to be alive to that.
Yes, 100%. And I think even just giving the diagnosis of Parkinson's, right?
Mm.
You have Parkinson's, people have described as a bomb. So I like that
Yeah.
sort of hand grenade and bomb analogy, but we often don't take the care and time to understand what that means to that patient moving forward. And I think we can work together to do better. You've brought up sort of the concept of I listened to the podcast and I loved it about this similar topic. And we will refer and link this for people to listen to as well. But the sense that, the sense of agency of the person living with the diagnosis is key as part of this sort of this interface. And maybe you could describe a little bit about that, and also the sense of giving the patient back their agency. Um, Relinquishes some of our control as well as the practitioners who are uh, trying to care for that patient.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's this very established sort of uh, idea of the sick role, that when you're ill, there's this sort of societal contract that you get certain things, certain types of care, people looking after you, maybe you go to a doctor or whatever, um, and your responsibility is to kind of try and be a good patient in that situation. But I think the way it's sold, particularly maybe in the West, is that it's a very passive process. You're there to receive care, and you just have to be a good person and just shut up and receive it. And that is not the way things work or should work, because uh, so much of the so many of the determinants of quality of life with being ill are things where the person needs to do something about it, actively participate and recognize that they have some agency and there are choices there. And we, on the other side, need to recognize that if we're giving people choices, that gives up some of our control. but also maybe it shows us we need to do things in a slightly different way to understand why, for example, a person doesn't choose to do the things that would objectively look like they should make them more, less ill or more well.
Yeah.
And why is we shouldn't just get angry with people or penalize them for that. We need to understand why that's happening. And I've been particularly in another part of my job, at King's, sort of interested in that more widely, for example, in people with chronic mental illness. So why is it that people with schizophrenia die on average 15 to 20 years before they should? And it's not generally by suicide, it's by treatable illnesses like diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease. And lots of that is happening because they're not good patients. So they don't turn up to appointments on time. And when they don't turn up to appointments, our system says, well, if you don't turn up to the appointment, I'm sorry, but that's it. We're not going to see you again.
Yeah.
But it's a lack of understanding about why they're not and what you might do to help them do that, which is again about providing agency, but providing support in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think also you mentioned giving up some agency when we're working in these, I guess there's various terms, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, spaces. So maybe you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, I mean that's it. It's a difficult thing to do, and I think actually it's not just about doctors. I think doctors is allied health professionals as well. For everybody, it's a difficult thing to do to work in a team. And I think the way that that's often resolved is by people having extremely sharply defined roles where they do their thing, they stay in their lane, and there's also the hierarchy. So there's usually a doctor at the top of the hierarchy, um, and then this team underneath. So both of those things don't work very well because there's knowledge that could be shared usefully between all of those professionals. And then, as somebody receiving that knowledge, you become empowered to actually deliver a lot more. And you can almost, in a sense, kind of channel the physiotherapist, the psychologist, or the psychologist can channel the neurologist. So, from the patient's perspective, that means that the person that they're seeing is much more helpful to them because they have all of this kind of collective knowledge. There's that is a scary thing to do. And the thing that immediately springs to mind is, well, what if people go outside, they start saying things which are, outside their range of expertise. But that's a risk, but you can manage that within a team. If a team is working well in this interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary way, then I think it can be really effective and also efficient. Because if you have to have the entire multidisciplinary team there all the time for every single patient, that is not doable. But if you can have a team that has all this collective knowledge where a single person in the team can do a lot of
Mhm.
all of these things, then that is much more efficient when they know how to ask for help, at the point where they might need it.
Yeah. So what would you, taking the FND lens that you've come from and this interface lens, what would you think would be the ideal way to approach a conversation about a person that you're newly diagnosing with Parkinson's with this lens?
So I think fundamentally there's never going to be it's never going to be great news to tell someone they have Parkinson's disease. So the outcome is not the person says, "Wow, that's thanks so much, that's brilliant." So it's always going to be something where this is changing somebody's life in that moment and changing the life of their family. So I think it has to be approached with that kind of seriousness, and honesty and kindness, really. And I think there's it's not so much the words that you say, but it's the way that it's said. I think, and the there's a lot about the feeling that you're giving, around that human kindness, really. Um, and that's a difficult thing to put into words what that is like. But I think we all know what it's like and know what it feels like.
Hmm.
And I think that the as well as delivering with that sort of kindness and honesty, it's then this degree of optimism and hope which is so important. And particularly that this is, yes, this is a difficult thing, but there are things that we can do together, and there's things that you can do which actually are going to make this easier and they're going to make it work better. And that this is a partnership from the very beginning. So uh, that kind of sense that there's somebody on your side, and maybe a group of people who are on your side, but there's a role for me in that as well, and that together we're going to work as a team. Um, and then the last thing, I suppose, is probably about having expectations somewhere in the right place, so that this is not something, and I would always say to people when I give a diagnosis of Parkinson's that unfortunately this is not something that I can take away or that anyone can take away, like you get rid of an infection with some antibiotics,
Mhm.
but it is something that we can manage, and we're going to work together to do that. So you're giving this reasonable expectation that it's not something where there's a magic cure out there, unfortunately. But at the same time, this is not, okay, I'm just going to go home and sit in a room and wait to die. There's this place in the middle, which is a real place. Um, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. The sense of optimism and hope, some compassion with giving it, and then a sense of agency that you give the patient and that you're with them on the way.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. So, and then instilling reasonable expectations, as you mentioned. So, well, this has been such an amazing conversation, Mark. I really appreciate you taking the time, and you're just such a wealth of knowledge and can impart something to each and every one of our patients that we see every day. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.